We're continuing on. We're talking about Avodas Karka and Shemittah. We're going to talk about three very loosely related things today. The last two times we spoke about the first is the rices that you can't do on Shemittah in the ground, and then the second one was about Issur Drabanan that you can't do. So there's a big shaila on the Achronim. A lot of Achronim talk about this. It starts from Minchas Chinuch. A lot of Achronim talk about whether those Issurim, let's say the Issur, the rice that there is to do on Shemittah, are those Issurim an Issur on a person? I'm not allowed to do that malacha. Or is it an Issur on the land that the land has to be rested? Obviously, the land doesn't listen to what the Baruch says, so the people are responsible to carry out that mission. But really, it's a mitzvah on the land. So
it's both, right?
What you say?
Nobody said it's only on the land.
Well, land don't have mitzvahs per se, so you're the defender of that mitzvah.
No, I understand what you're saying. Of course, it's on you not to let your land get worked on, but it's also nobody just says it's just on you not to let the land. They say it's both on the person not to do work. No. Some people say it's completely a person related. I'll tell you some of the proofs in a second, but first let me just give you some of the nafkaminas, and I'll help you just wrap your hand around it better. Just some of the nafkaminas to what should I care? It sounds very theoretical. They have a number of nafkaminas like this. First is one we spoke about a couple of weeks ago, which was whether women can be chayiv in the mitzvah aseh of Shemitah. Okay, seemingly the mitzvah should be mitzvah shazman grama. Women should be part from the mitzvah aseh of Shemitah. And one of the answers we had mentioned at the time was that it could be that it's not a mitzvah on the person, it's a mitzvah on the land, and whoever is the owner of the land is responsible, and if the lady gets responsible, it's because her land has to do this, and as the owner, she has to take care of it. That was one possible answer to that. Okay, a case that many people talk about is the Issur of Amir La'akam on Shemitah. Is that an Issur? Is that part of the Issur D'Oraisa? If the mitzvah is my land has to rest, then it doesn't make a difference whether I actually, plant something in the ground, or I tell the guy to plant something in the ground. It's all the same. But if you say, no, it's just a mitzvah on me, well, a mitzvah on me means there's no mitzvah on the guy, so it's just an Issur D'Oraisa of Amir La'akam. Okay. What happens if you live in a building, and some of the people in the building are not Shem Shabbos, and they hire a gardener to take care of the building. So the building has a gardener taking care of the garden in front of the building on Shemitah. Okay, so my land, I'm part owner of that land that surrounds the building. My land is not resting. My land is being planted and taken care of on Shemitah. My mechuyev to some go as far as say that I should be mafkir my rights to the land around the building because my land is working on Shemitah. So, and I have a responsibility to not have my land. I can't physically stop them. I don't get one vote in the Vadabayas. I don't get one vote, but I can mostly just, recuse myself, just step back and say, I don't own that land anymore, and my land's not doing any anymore. Okay? What about if a person wants to put onto his field?
You can just say that and just say, I'm not.
That's a shayla. It's a shayla whether it's even effective. Let's say you should do it, it doesn't mean anything. You just walk away from the land.
Okay, but let's say you should do it. How do you do it?
That's a secondary question. Is it physically possible? Could you halachically just step away from the land and say, I don't want to own part of the land? That's a second answer to the same question. Okay. Can I put down before Shemitah, it's a few weeks before Shemitah now, can I go down and put a slow release fertilizer onto my field that'll keep on fertilizing for the whole Shemitah, or for, a couple of months? Or what happens if I set my watering system? I said that every Monday morning from 8 to 11, the sprinklers go on. So I'm not going to do any malacha on Shemitah, but obviously my land is not resting. I'm doing something to make it that the land doesn't rest on Shemitah, but I'm not doing any malacha. I'm sleeping and the grass is being watered. So these are all things that connect to this shayla. And one shayla, which is pretty popular, the shayla actually came to our office a week or two ago, which is there any restriction on planting things before Shemitah that will take root on Shemitah? Okay, now, if you remember, way back at the beginning, we spoke about that there's a specific Issur to plant fruit-bearing trees for 44 days before Shemitah. There's a special Issur for that. We're not talking about that. One day I want to just plant some other flowers. I want to plant a tree. I want to plant a tomato bush right before Shemitah. So if the concern is that my land has to rest, what I did today, Erev Shemitah, is causing me to take root on Shemitah. That might be an Issur, as opposed to if the Issur is on me, the Issur is on me during Shemitah. Okay, so just for that shayla, just you should know about that. There are those who are machmir. They say you shouldn't plant for a certain day before him. Shom Zalman says it's very not clear that you have to be machmir, and he says all you should be machmir on is it's been based on a lot of seikas is for the last day of El is the 29th day of El. So he says on the 29th and on the 28th you shouldn't plant. And on the 27th, for the last few minutes before Shkia, we'll say Mitzvah Yom Kippur. And if you don't plant for those 3 days, we'll say that anything planted before or a little before Shkia on the 27th of El is Mutter. So this year, the 29th is on Wednesday, the 28th is on Tuesday. So on Monday, from Monday afternoon right before Shkia, you can't plant right before Shemitah, because you should have a little bit of Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. And we'll say anything planted before then, and then we'll assume took root before Shemitah, and you won't have a problem. Okay. And the Chazon Ish says completely, I didn't tell you what the names here, but the Chazon Ish says there's completely no Issur on a person, no Issur on the land, it's completely a person-related Issur. If the person's not being of any Issur, you can do whatever you want, you can plant 5 minutes before you go to shul on Erev Rosh Hashanah. Okay. Some of the rayas to this shaila, okay, are like this. The Torah, it says, when the Torah describes the mitzvah of Shemitah, it says, V'shal Saharetz. Okay, the Torah describes it as the land resting, implying that it has to do with the land. Obviously, we're the guardians of the land, but the land is the one that has to do the resting. And the Gemara, the Gemara says pretty straightforward. The Gemara says, Adam mitzvah ashrisis sadehu b'shvius. Okay, a person's mitzvah that his land should rest during Shemitah. Sure sounds like, the way the pasuk says, that the land is what is responsible, and I'm the one who takes care of that mitzvah. Okay, when the Rambam, before every one of the Sfarim in the Rambam, he has a listing of the mitzvahs that are going to be in that sefer. Just a brief listing. This sefer has 4 mitzvahs asay and 3 mitzvahs less asay. So before Hilchos Shemitah V'Yovel, he says the mitzvah is this. When he describes this mitzvah, he says the mitzvah is shetishbois haaretz. Okay, sounding like the pasuk. In the sefer mitzvahs, he doesn't say. In the sefer mitzvahs, he says shetzivanu lishbois on this in this year. Okay, he's talking person related. Okay, so these are diukum this way and that way. The Chazon Ish says, I don't understand it. He says, how could it be that the mitzvah is not on the person? He says, let's say something starts growing in my backyard on Shemitah. Okay, so it just grows by itself. So it just starts growing. He says, is there a mitzvah to rip it out of the ground? If I have a mitzvah to make sure that my land, nothing grows, why don't I have to go and rip the stuff out of the ground? Now, midrabanan, there may be such mitzvahs. But with the rice, there's no such thing. If something starts growing in my backyard, I don't have to pull it out of the ground. Why not? If you're supposed to be watching the ground that no malacha gets done, why don't you rip it out? He said even further. If you remember, the Issur to water your plants is only Issur D'Rabbanan. Okay? On Shemitah, watering your plants is almost everything is D'Rabbanan, but watering is the example he uses. Watering your plants is D'Rabbanan. He says that means midaraisa, I'm allowed to sit and water my plants. He says, aren't I making them grow? If you're not supposed to have things grow in Shemitah, that's what I'm doing. I'm making things grow. Midaraisa, I'm allowed to sit there and water my lawn. What are you doing watering your grass? What you're doing is making things grow in Shemitah. So if you think there's an Issur on the ground, I have to make sure the ground doesn't do things. Maybe you won't believe that I have to rip things out. But I'm allowed to water it to make them grow. He says, I can't believe that. So that's one of the Chazon Ish's diukim of the thing on it. Okay. So related to this whole thing, this is even marginally related to that. Ruchai Kanievsky has the following shot. The Yerushalmi says, if you have a field and the stuff is not doing well, so Yerushalmi says like this: the guy wants to do is he wants to hang up a sign out by his field that people should daven that his field should do well. Okay, now the malacha, he wants to hang up a sign, please daven l'refuah shleima, and say, Chaya ben Basia. You want to say no, I want you to daven for this field. So Yerushalmi talks about it. And Yerushalmi says like this: if you're davening that the field should, for ukmi ilana, if you're davening that the field should not get damaged, if that's what the people are going to daven that the field should not ruin its peiros, that's okay. If you're davening for avri ilana, if you're davening that the field should do better, should grow better, that you're not allowed to put up a sign like that. Okay, which is consistent with what the rules we learned. But for Issur and D'Rabbanan, anything other than the few mochas d'oraisa, you're only allowed to do things to keep the field from getting damaged. You're not allowed to do things to help it do a better job. So Yerushalmi says you can hang up a sign, please daven for my field that the shouldn't be ruined, but you're not allowed to daven for the field, please daven that I should have more peiros on my field. He says, so what do you see from there? He says, what do you see from this Yerushalmi? That the malachas on Shabbos are even, malachas on Shvius, he says, are even for what he calls inyanim segulium. Okay, not only am I not allowed to take a shovel and start digging in my backyard, but I'm not even allowed to hang up a sign that people should daven for it. That's not malacha in the traditional sense. I'm not watering or digging or raking. I'm just having people down. He says, see that the malachas even go for inyanim segulium. He asks that in Hilchos Shabbos, that's not the thing. In Hilchos Shabbos it says, you're allowed to say a lachash, an incantation. You're allowed to just say words to trap an animal. Okay, you're allowed to do that on Shabbos. Even though usually on Shabbos you would think that on Shabbos it depends on Meleches Machshavos. If you're successful in getting a goal, and you are, you get the animal trapped, that's not also on Shabbos. Because you're not doing any physical malacha. But you see on Shemitah, you're not allowed to do that. You can't hang up the sign that people should daven that your field should do better. So, he says, maybe, it depends on the shiloh that we've been talking about. Maybe on Shemitah I have a mitzvah that the land should rest. The mitzvah is V'shav Sa'aretz. If people by davening is going to make the land not rest, the land didn't rest. But for traditional malacha, like on Shabbos, you have to actually do an action. But for resting on Shemitah, it depends if the land rests and the land did rest. He's not convinced that it depends on that. Came along, he brings it. His son asked him a question like this. A Gemara, this is a Bavli, says, if there's a drought on Shemitah, if you have a drought on Shemitah, you could daven that it should rain even if we're eating lana. So he says, so what's going on over here? I just told you that you can only hang up the sign. You can only hang up the sign to keep the field from getting ruined. But it's okay for me to daven that it should rain and avru lana. So he wants to say that the nafkamina is that when the person hangs up the sign, he's doing an action. Because you have to bang the sign onto the tree, or you have to hang it off the thing. You're doing unaction. So there can't be an Issur unless there's unaction happening. Just davening is okay. But the Issur is because I asked you to daven. Because I hung up a sign to ask you to daven. I don't exactly get it. I don't see what's the nafkamina. If I ask you, if davening is okay, so why should hang up a sign to daven be not okay? Sure, I did an action. I did hang up a sign, but that didn't really do much different than if davening is mutter. So what's wrong with...
Maybe you can't hang the sign on the Karka. You just told people that's okay.
So
it's not the Karka, you know.
So if it's Malachas the Karka hanging sign, that's a malacha to hang the sign. So it's hard to hear. I would have more easily understood. I would have more easily understood that Machlek is here, the Bab and Yerushalmi. I mean, it's almost exactly the same case. The Yerushalmi is concerned about what he calls inyanim seguliyim and just having the land rest. That's having the shiloh. And the Bali, by saying that you're allowed to daven, is telling us that you don't have to have the land rest. It only depends if you do malacha. You have to do malacha. You're just davening. To me, I'm saying just me looking at it, sure looks like that the Bali and Yerushalmi are arguing on this point. Is there an Issur for the land to do malacha? Do I have to make sure the land does do malacha, or do I have to not do malacha myself? To us, that's what it seems like.
When you say land rest, okay, we define land rest as the land is doing nothing. Even a land that's doing nothing is doing something.
Okay.
There's life that's going on underneath. The plants that have been there from beforehand are growing. That's continuing to happen. If the water's coming from Shemayim, it's still growing.
Right.
The land is never going to rest in the sense that you're talking about. On the other hand, anything that's being done that changes the matzah from what it was when it walked into Shemitah, that changes the matzah and says, okay, now here's a new entity.
Okay. I accept that.
I'm trying to say the Issur isn't on the dirt. It's on the produce. It's on the items that are in there.
The new plants.
The new plants
okay.
that haven't been there from the moment on Rosh Hashanah at the beginning of the year.
Okay.
So anything that isn't there from Rosh Hashanah at the beginning of the year, that's the definition of work, of lack of rest. But anything that's ongoing is resting.
Okay.
When the person's asking to pray for rain. Okay, he's praying to rain for something that's going to happen from Shemayim, which is Mavela, going to happen, so that this field is going to continue to go stuff that was already in there. So that's not rest. That's not a problem of resting. So
you're saying the reason is because rain is not an issue. So,
right.
So let's say
you can pray for rain.
So let's say if I ask a guy to do from to water my field, is that okay? I'm not talking the midrash on it. Is that issue the rights of my land not resting if I ask a guy to do malacha?
Right, it's okay for you to water your grass.
No, I'm not talking. I'm talking about from the conceptual perspective. Can I ask the guy? Is that just amir la'akim, or is that really doing the Issur of watering your field?
No, that's doing an action. I would do that as an extension of action because you're asking someone to.
So what's if I ask Hashem to do it, or I ask the guy to do it? What's the difference? Are you saying field growing further? That's not an issue. What's if I ask Hashem or ask the guy? I got someone to water it. So because I have to make sure the field doesn't get watered, then I shouldn't ask Hashem. I can't stop him, but I don't ask Hashem, and I shouldn't ask the guy. If it's just what I can't do, I'm not doing it. Hashem's doing it with the guys. Those are okay. And there's another thing also that you only talked about two of the malachas, but there's a malacha of pruning trees also. Of pruning grape trees is a malacha deraisa. There's a malacha of kaitzer as an owner. Those are malachas that have to do with the ground.
Those are actions that don't even have to do with the ground.
That says to me that it's not only that the land shouldn't produce new things. There are malachas that
new things should be reverse it. It's not that the land shouldn't produce new things. It's that new things shouldn't be produced.
Okay.
On that land. New things shouldn't be produced on that land. Land that's not near Yisrael, new things can be produced there. Land that doesn't belong, okay. But if it belongs to a Jew, new things shouldn't be produced on that land. That's the issue. So like you're cutting, you're pruning, you're doing all that, that's new things being produced. You're watering, that's new things being produced.
If I water a tree to grow new apples, and I prune a grape tree, I mean,
that's an action that you
do. Okay. It was an interesting question. I'm not sure if we know the real answer, but as I mentioned, I didn't tell you all the names. There's a whole pile of achronim. It starts really from Minchas Chinuch, who talked about the Shaila, whether the Issur is for me or for the land. Okay. Move to another thing which is connected. And that is, we're talking... Sorry, no slides.
It's all right. I'm concentrating. I need something to look at. I've got slides, got wonderful PowerPoints and slides, all kinds of cute pictures.
I told him I didn't think that it was respectful to finish my slides in the middle of the meeting. So I wasn't finished before this morning, so that's why we don't have slides. Okay. We talked about the Issurim to do malacha on Shvius. Okay, there's an Issur to do malacha. There's another mitzvah. I'm going to talk about it just for a minute. Another mitzvah that there is that marginally relates, that's connected to that, which is, there's a mitzvah, we've mentioned it, there's a mitzvah to be mafkir your fields, to let everything be open and people should come and take what they want to. It's one, that I see one halacha in the Rambam, that you have to be mafkir your fields. And I'm going to briefly mention a few of the issues that there are about being mafkir your stuff. Okay, the first is, also a shayla nachrain, seemingly very interrelated to what we just talked about, which is, does the hefker that the Torah says the produce is hefker, is that automatic, or is that a mitzvah that I should be mafkir my produce and allow people to take from it? In other words, does it happen automatically? Hashem says the produce of the 7th year is hefker, and anyone can take it. I mean, if I lock up my door, I locked up my door, but be'etzem it's hefker. Or is it a mitzvah that I have to go and be mafkir my field? Mafkir mean so it's a shiloh, what the Gemara means, and if nafkamin is, two I'll tell you, nafkamin is, what happens if it's a chesed of katan? Okay, a katan owns a field, and he doesn't have a mitzvah to mafkir it, he doesn't have to do it, but if the person said all the produce of the 7th year is hefker it is. Okay, it's all hefker automatically. It's not because I chose to make it hefker, it's automatically hefker. Or, what about if it belongs to a guy? Now, I'm not talking about whether the guy will listen to our directive that he should be mafkir his field. But if the produce of a guy's field is be'etzem hefker, then it's part of Trumas Amaisus. Then there's no Trumas Amaisus on it because produce of hefker is not chayim Trumas Amaisus. If we say it's not hefker, the Torah says you should make it hefker, well, the guy's not making it hefker, he doesn't care about the din, so he's not making it hefker, so then, at the time when the Gemara Malach happened, what?
Take it. If it's not looking, you take it.
No, but if it's be'etzem hefker. No, but right, if it's be'etzem hefker, then if the Torah is hefker, it is, but if the mitzvah is just on people, since he doesn't have to do the mitzvah, by the time the Gemara Malach happened, when it became chayim Trumas Amaisus, it belonged to a person, it's chayim Trumas Amaisus. Okay,
you're assuming that his Karka is chayim.
Yeah, okay, we're not talking about that. Yes, that's... I don't mean I'm not talking about it. That question, which we're going to talk about it in a future time, is interrelated to the question we're talking right now. Is the hefker automatic, or are the mitzvahs automatic, or are the mitzvahs because the people have to do them? That shayla, and whether yesh kinyan are interrelated. Anyhow, so what we're talking. This question now is connected to the shayla we talked about before. The shayla we talked about before is the mitzvah on the land, the mitzvah on the person, is very similar to this question. Is the hefker mitzvah a mitzvah automatic because it's a mitzvah on the land? The land has these rules. No one owns it for this year, or is it a mitzvah on the person? Okay, another thing. When the mitzvah is that you should make your things hefker, you only need to make it hefker for Yidden to come in and eat the produce. If a guy wants to come in, or an animal wants to come in, you don't have to let them in. A person wants to come in and damage your trees, or damage your field, you don't have to let them in. Because the produce is hefker, not the tree. So if the guy's going to come in and break a branch off your tree, you don't have to let him in. If a person's going to come in and take the produce and not eat it with Kedusha Shvius, he's not going to eat it the way he's supposed to. You're not going to let him in. Or a person wants to stop me. He wants to take pictures of your scenery around your house. You don't have to let him in. The only right that the person has is to come in and eat the produce, the Kedusha Shvius. If he wants to come in for other purpose, you don't have to do it. And related to that is, there's a shayla whether you're mechuyev to leave your fields open 24/7. Do you have to open the doors and leave it open all the time? Or could you make hours? I guess you can't make from 2 to 3 a.m., but could you just set it hours? The field is open from 1 to 5 in the afternoon and come then. Otherwise, I don't need people trampling through my field. Okay, that's a shayla with you.
So you're not going to knock at the field, you're not going to produce?
Yes, only the produce.
You have to give them
access. They have to have the way to get it. I mean, how am I going to get my orange if you don't let me in? So, but I might be able to restrict when you come in, because the field is mine.
Right.
The field and the tree is mine. You can have the oranges. So I might say, okay, listen, it's in the afternoons, so you can come in there. There's a shayla that the person, if and how much a person is allowed to compensate the original owner for taking his produce. And last is the produce is hefker for everybody. We pass in the produce is hefker even for Ashir, not just for anyone. It's hefker for everybody. But there are shaylas about how much a person is allowed to take. Okay, so we ran through that pretty quickly. But I just could not say that there's a mitzvah hefker. Okay. So we've been talking about, our last topic for today is like this. We talked about that there's a mitzvah to not do avodas Karka, and there's a mitzvah to be mafkir your fields, to be mafkir the produce of your field. What happens if a person did not follow the din? And the person either was not mafkir his fields, or the person worked his field like regularly, he did malachas like he wasn't supposed to. Okay? Does that have any effect on the produce of that field? Okay? Those things are called Meshumar Ne'evad. Meshumar means it was guarded, it was watched. The person was not mafkir. And Ne'evad means that he worked the field. He did the malachas. He wasn't supposed to. He planted something in his produce. He pruned his grape trees, and do those grapes become usur? Okay, so that question is a machlokes rishonim. The machmir on those two shaylas, they're not exactly the same, but the machmir on those two shaylas, the Rebbeinu Tam and the Ravid, are machmir on those two shaylas. They say Meshumar Ne'evad the produce itself becomes usur. And many rishonim disagree and say that it's not true. The person did the wrong thing. He worked his field or he guarded his produce. The produce itself does not inherently become mutter, and
not inherently become
usur. I say mutter doesn't become usur, and the produce is usur. He did the wrong thing, but it doesn't affect the status of the produce. And the contemporary poskim, Chazon Ish, Moshe, Rishon Zalman, all say that we pass like in the kilim on these shaylos. Okay, the Meshumar Ne'evad is mutter. Now, so before I continue, I just want to, just a footnote to this is, that if you look in the Sram of Chazon Ish, you'll see that sometimes he says to be machmir, and sometimes he says to be mekel. Okay? But it's accepted that Chazon Ish says to be mekel. So Chaim Kanievsky says that they asked the Chazon Ish, how come you said sometimes to be machmir and sometimes you said to be mekel? Like, what's going on over here? You're not being consistent. And he said to them, the reason why he did that is because he wanted people to realize that this is a machlokes rishonim, and the ikar din is that you could be mekel, but they should realize that this is a tzad to be machmir. So if someone wrote usur, to leave it a little ambiguous, people realize it's machmir, and supposedly, according to this version, the Chazon Ish personally was machmir on that child. Okay, according to this version. In Tzitz Eliezer, he says he heard from other talmidim that the Chazon Ish really originally was machmir. Earlier in his life he was machmir, later in his life he was completely mekel, and that you could completely be mekel. Okay, so different versions of what Chazon Ish said.
So he finds himself in a position where he's eating fruit that he may have been working on it. So there's a tzad to be mekel on the fruit.
That the fruit is mut, right? The fruit did not get no. It's very accepted. Ramesh says it sometimes. It's very accepted that Meshumar Ne'evad is mutter. Okay, now. So that sounds like a great cool, like you're saying. Whoa, I just found out some really good news. Meshumar Ne'evad is mutter. Now, we will find out in the next 2 times that we speak that there's another issue called svichen. Okay, we're not talking about that now. That's another issue that's in this context much more serious. Okay, that potentially makes it that I can't just eat what I want to. But for today, we're talking about Meshumar Ne'evad, and we just found out this big kula that it's pretty accepted nowadays that Meshumar Ne'evad the food does not become usur. He did the wrong thing, but it's not usur. The problem is the question, the more obvious question is like this. This shita will deal with the Meshumar of Rebbeinu Tam. It was not said in a vacuum. Rebbeinu Tam didn't just wake up one day and say, I think the Meshumar is usur. Where did that come from? Okay, so it comes from a Mishnah and a Gemara, not in the same example. A Mishnah and a Gemara that say basically that someone watches his produce, he can't buy the produce from him. So Rebbeinu Tam says the reason why you can't buy from him is because it's usur. The produce is usur. So wait, you can't buy from the guy because the produce is usur. That's how Rebbeinu Tam learns the Gemara. And the other Rishonim will argue, say, no, that's not what the Mishnah, that's not what the Gemara meant. The Gemara meant was, there's an Issur to purchase it. The produce is not usur, but there's an Issur to purchase it. Why? The Gemara almost says this out, straight out. The reason is because there's an Issur called Moiser Demei Shvius Lamaretz, which is, when you buy something during Shemittah, we'll find this about this in the future. When you buy something during Shemittah, if this drink had Kedusha Shvias, and I buy it, then the money that I spent on it now also has Kedusha Shvias. So both of them have it, the produce itself and the money that I bought it with have Kedusha Shvias. So if I go to you, who were Shimer, this Paris, you watched these, you guarded this produce, you didn't let anybody take it. So if I give you the money, obviously you don't care about the mitzvah of Shemitah. So when I give you $1 for your orange, you're going to take that $1 and you're going to go buy a pair of shoes with it. You're not going to buy shoes with money with Kedusha Shvias. You're going to go put the money into the bank and use it for something else. You're going to use it improperly. So there's an issur to give money that has Kedusha Shvias to someone who won't treat it properly. So the reason why the mission and the Gemara said you're not allowed to buy the produce from this person is not because the produce is also. It's because when you buy it, he's obviously a person who doesn't care about these dinim. When you give him the money, you're being moished to make shvias la'amaretz. You're giving the money of shvias to somebody who's not going to treat it appropriately, and therefore you're not allowed to do that. So the Rishonim argue on Rabbeinu Tam. It's true that they hold that Meshumar is mutter, but they don't hold you can't buy it. So how meaningful is it going to be that to know that Meshumar?
You could buy it.
You could buy. How did he get it?
But you could eat it.
So the only not going to mean is going to be. So at this point, how did
you went to the field and picked it up.
You mean you took it out of the guy's field?
Yeah.
Okay, that's true. It could happen like that. Okay, but for me and you are not likely to walk into the guy's field and pick up an orange. So it could come up if like what you were intimating was I'm in someone's house. Okay, I sit down to eat at someone's house. He's not makbid, and he serves me. He cuts up an orange for me, and he says, "Here, have a piece of orange." I know it's Meshumar Ne'evad, so I'm saying, "Listen, how he got it, that's not my problem. I mean, he did the wrong thing, that's his issue. But for me, the orange is not us. Okay, so that's true. So I was saved a certain amount, but it's not as grand as you might have thought it would be."
According to one that say it's usher, many times it's usher. So who loses Kedusha Shvias?
Why does Kedusha Shvias?
Well, because otherwise we have no right. Of course they're right. Of course they're right. That you can't give it to them, you can't buy it because it has Kedusha Shvias and the guy's not going to take care of it. Why would Rabbeinu Tam think there's a right from there? That you can't buy it because it's usher. It's no right. It's partial because it has Kedusha Shvias. The guy's not going to keep it. But if it's usher, you got to destroy it. What do you do with it? How can it have Kedusha Shvias and eat it? You got to. What do you do with it?
I have to think back. I don't know the answer to the question.
I have Kedusha Shvias, but you got no choice. You can't.
The answer is that I said not Meshumar.
I don't remember. It comes from a Teres Kranim. I don't remember.
So I don't have to worry if I go to somebody's house about what they're doing with shvius?
Well, this part of it, the Meshumar Ne'evad, the Svicha part is it ends up being a much more serious concern. But we're talking about now with an orange, which it doesn't have the Svicha issue. So I just have Kedusha Shvias. So I say, I'm sorry, is it also because it's Meshumar? I say, I don't have to worry about that.
But it has Kedusha Shvias.
It might have Kedusha Shvias.
Still have to eat the orange and be careful about the...
I understand, but I don't have to reject the food. I don't have to say the food is treif. If you were serving me something, if you would have served me tomato, I wouldn't be able to eat it.
It's not Florida orange. You can't treat it like a kind of
No, okay, but
it's got Kedusha Shvias.
But I'm within range that I can eat. What I'll do with it, I'll treat it properly, but I'll be allowed to eat it. According to Rabbeinu Tam, I can't eat it. It's usher. Okay, so it could be that the only heter, you could be happily walk away and say, okay, the only heter was that if someone feeds you the food, you're allowed to eat it. Okay, but I'm going to tell you 3 other ways that we can use this heter, okay, that are grander than just that simple approach, even according to other Rishonim. The first is like this. The Gemara, I told you it's a mission in the Gemara. The Gemara that talks about doing this thing, it's Gemara in Sukkah. Gemara in Sukkah. Towards the end of Sukkah, the Gemara says, the Gemara doesn't say it's usher. Well, the Gemara says is, you have to buy it b'havlah. That is to say, you have to buy it from this person in a way that there won't be Kedusha Shvias on the money. B'havlah means you buy it together with many other things. I give him $10 for this whole basket of items. One of them is the one with Kedusha Shvias. There's no Kedusha Shvias on the money then. So the Gemara says you buy it b'havlah. The more modern version of that, instead of buying it b'havlah, is we buy it b'hakafa, you buy it on credit. Okay? Buying on credit might be as easy, we'll talk about this when we get to Kedusha Shvias, might be as easy as paying with a credit card or a check. Okay? There are many who hold like that'll be good enough. So in other words, the cooler will be, even if the fruit is also, I can't buy it no matter what. But if the food is mutter, the problem is just giving him money with Kedusha Shvias. Well, there are ways to avoid getting Kedusha Shvias onto the money. I can buy it in a way that doesn't put Kedusha Shvias onto the money. So the cooler means that I might even be able to buy the orange, as long as I manage to not give him money for it. I have to find a different way to do it. B'havlah, b'hakafa, there are ways that we get around, so to speak, getting Kedusha Shvias. The money has no Kedusha Shvias. I get the orange. He has money that's clean, and we're okay, and I'm allowed to do it. So that's one, so to speak, way that we could use this cooler, more than just if someone's serving the orange. Second is, Second, another nafkamina. This is a different kind of a nafkamina, which is, this is the case that Moshe is talking about. Moshe is talking about using an esrig that's kedusha shviyas. That'll be a way later topic. An esrig that's kedusha shviyas. That'll be for a year from now. So Moshe says is if the din would be like a Tam, that the esrig is usher to eat, then it would be possible for the mitzvah also. I wouldn't be allowed to use it for the mitzvah because it's something, so to speak, treif. Not everybody agrees that last step that I just said is correct, but Moshe says if the esrig would be usher to eat, then it would be usher to use it as an esrig also. But since we don't pass like that, we pass in like that the Meshumar is mutter, the esrig is mutter to eat, and since it's mutter to eat, I'm allowed to use it for the mitzvah. So it means it's similar to what the guy served me, but if there's a person in shul that has an esrig, or I got the esrig improperly, I got it incorrectly, and I have the esrig in my hand that was Meshumar, I'm allowed to use that for the mitzvah, and I don't have to worry that it's an esrig that's possible for the mitzvah. I'm allowed to use it. Okay. Now, the last is, Rosh Hashanah says, this is controversial, and he says like this. He says, the Issur, to be Moshe Demei Shviyas La'amaretz, assumes that the person is taka, like the case in the Mishnah, he's a person who is shomer his peri shviyas, he doesn't care about the din. If the person who I'm getting it from did it based because he thinks it's the correct thing to do, he did it because, in his words, a Rav Mumcha told him that he's allowed to do that, I don't have any problem giving him Demei Shviyas. So that means this, if the person who did it was samach on the Heter Mechira, I don't hold to the Heter Mechira, but there are definitely respectable Rabbanim who told him that he could rely on the Heter Mechira. So Rav Zalman says, so that person, I'm not considered giving Demei Shviyas La'amaretz, I'm giving it to a person who to him it has no Kedusha Shviyas. And from his perspective, the money I'm giving has no Kedusha Shviyas, and he'll do nothing wrong by buying shoes with it afterwards. So, even though I personally don't hold of it, I can give him the money and say to him, go ahead, I want to buy an orange from you. I can write you straight out, here's the dollar, I want your orange. To me, I'm giving money to an Amaretz, but it's not true. Because he's, so to speak, not an Amaretz. He's being samach on acceptable opinion. He has a reasonable opinion. Now, I don't agree with that. My Rav told me not to do that. But he has an opinion that says that it's mutter. There's no issue to give money to that. You could even buy it straight from the guy. Now, the Gemara is talking about...
No, the whole thing is...
He talks... It relates to Lifnei Iver. It's a little worse than Lifnei Iver because I'm actually giving money with Kedusha. It's a little different, but it's related to that. From Zalman talks about Lifnei Iver and Shul also. He says the issue would only be, in the Gemara's case, is I bought it from a guy who doesn't care. He was Mama Sharmi, he doesn't care. In this case, I'm not doing that. Yeah, similar to that. That's a little simpler. Over here, I in din don't hold this as much. Over there, okay, I'm not sure. Okay, but now that kula, which is a little controversial, that kula, that's saying you realize what's coming here, between the lines, which is that I don't hold the Heter Mechira, but I at least hold that it's a legitimate opinion. Okay, that's coming through in the translation. Okay, I hold that it's a legitimate opinion, even if I don't agree with it. Okay, but what happens is this kula that Rav Zalman is saying is only going to work if I know that the person who has the produce was samach on the Heter Mechira. What happens if I have a person who was not samach on the Heter Mechira? He just took care of his field, just stopped. Okay. In other words, we're going to find out when we get to we'll talk about the Heter Mechira. Not everybody has a Mechira done on their land. There are lots of people in Eretz Yisrael who plow the land and plant and do everything, and they don't have any Heter Mechira. They don't care anything. Just like they drive on Shabbos, they plant their field in Shemittah. They don't care about Heter Mechira at all. So, not just because the person might be samach on the Heter Mechira, that doesn't mean he did. I have to know that he did. I mean, if I walk into a store that says, sorry, hanging up, we're under the hashgacha of this person because we follow Heter Mechira, that's what Shemzam is talking about. But if I just go over to a guy in the street, or I just go over to a fruit stand in the Ben Yehuda Shuk, and I say, here's $1 for your orange, I don't know if that guy did the Heter Mechira. Maybe he did nothing. He may not be samach on anything. Now, so that, I think, is correct. What happens now, but in a different case? What happens if I come to Ted's, the supermarket, this food store here, and they're having persimmons from Eretz Yisrael, and it says the name of the place that they get it from, and I know that those people follow the Heter Mechira. I know the people with the brand, the farm they get it is Heter Mechira. Am I allowed to give the money to Ted? I don't know if that's the guy's name. To the guy who runs Ted, am I allowed to give it to him? I'm giving money to somebody who is samach on the Heter Mechira. No. The guy who runs Ted, he doesn't know from Heter Mechira nothing. He's not samach on a Rav Mumcha. He doesn't know anything. He bought a box of persimmons. He doesn't know anything from Heter Mechira. So
to give it to a guy bichlal saying...
Yeah, Moshe Demei Shviyas. He's not going to treat it with Kedusha Shviyas. If I had... I'm making this money to Kedusha Shviyas, and I'm basically throwing the money out to anybody to waste it. So the question is, am I giving to this guy? He wasn't samach on Heter Mechira. Well, he really was. I mean, he doesn't know that, but he was samach on the Heter Mechira. But really, is it mutter because that person has someone to rely on? Therefore, I say, if it's on your shoulders, I'm giving you the money because you're responsible. Or is it because there is a shita out there, and then there's a reasonable shita out there that's good enough? Okay? It may depend. This shaila may depend on. So Rosh Hashanah says. Rosh Hashanah says, really? You thought the first part I said was in off. He says, what would happen? He says, what would happen if the Rav who thinks you should be machmir about heter mechira? Okay, here's the Rav. Okay, Rabbi A. He thinks you should be machmir heter mechira. Should not be someone about heter mechira. Someone comes over to him and says to him, I'm not sure what I should do. Should I use the heter mechira or should I not? What do you think the din is? Should I use it or not? Now, I'm not exactly sure what exactly the case was. He says that Rav should say, you're allowed to be meko by drabanan. You follow the meko. Halacha divya meko b'drabanan, and therefore you should follow the mekilim. I personally think you should be machmir, but the din is when there's a machlokes about an issur drabanan, you follow the mekilim. So Rosh Hashanah says the Rav himself would sort of have to tell you should follow the mekilim. There's a sort of like the din is that it's mutter. It's not that you followed him that it's mutter. The din really is that it's mutter because it's an issur drabanan, as we've heard. Issur Shemittah nowadays is drabanan. Issur is issur drabanan, and issur drabanan, the din is you follow the meko. So even the machmir would have to tell you to follow the meko, which is I so to speak, have to tell you to follow them. In which case, Ted is not. It's not because he's some kind of rug, because that's so to speak the din. So to speak, that's the din. That those persimmons are mutter. So it's not because he was some kind of rug. So this part is even. It's in a footnote. That part is even more controversial than the first part. It's not even saying that it's a legitimate opinion. He's saying is, well, once it's a legitimate opinion, and we're only talking about the Rabbanan, so we're stuck. Even if we think it's usher, we have to be meko.
This isn't halacha l'maaseh because it's speaking, right?
We're talking about things that are only involved with the Issur Meshumar Ne'evad. We're not talking about the things that have to do with sweeping, where everyone will agree to. That's the next two times in Mitzvah.
The mechira itself could be the Issur. If you also it's a chodim,
yeah.
There's a Issur the Issur.
No. My persimmon that I'm holding, the shaila on this persimmon is only a shaila of a drabanan. So could I be samach on the mekilim?
That's going to be samach.
No, I'm not talking whether you should make the mekilim. I'm talking about I have a persimmon in my hand. Should I say this is mutter or usher? Well, that's a shaila of a drabanan. So there's a shaila in these poskim. These people say yes, these people say not. So the Rav who's not going to have to take to follow the mekilim, and the persimmon will be mutter. Go figure.
You know, but for the consumer, even the Rav would say it's mutter because he has a Rav won't put to be samach.
No. Can I? Obviously, Mr. Ted's. I mean, what's the difference? If the Rav asked, if I went to the Rav and said, should I follow that cheater or that cheater?
In terms of what, buying the persimmon or selling it?
No.
Or using it?
Well, if you say, should I do the mechir, we run into his problem. I might be this right. But sort of in the theory of it.
Because if he needs the persimmons, then because he has a Rav won't put to be, so then even the Rav himself would be samach.
But no, I mean to buy. But can I eat? No. Can I? Okay, you're right. I'm not going to end up in that issue. But in the theoretical shaila, should I be samach on the heter mechira? Should I not be samach on it? If I don't have Issur and D'Oraisa, I should be samach on the mekilim. He's going to have to tell me to be samach on the mekilim because it's a shaila of the Rabbanan. It's a shaila of the Rabbanan. You have to follow the mekilim, even though I hold it's usher. We have a funny situation. Yes, sir.